Hello, I'm Leighellen, and this is Momma Leighellen's Book Nook. Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about my 5 favorite books from January of 2021. So this past month, I read 19 books and listened to 1 audiobook. There were so many great books, but so hard to narrow down my choices, especially because I love memoirs, and one of the ones that I read was Alex Trebek's And the Answer Is, and that was very sweet. However, there were 5 books that rose above the rest, and that is what I will be sharing with you today. These are my 5 favorite books from January of 2021. So here's my stack. These are the 5 books that I thought were the best of the rest. And what I think is fun about this stack is that it encompasses so many different genres, which is very intuitive to my reading style. So you've got a little bit of romance, you've got historical fiction, you've got literary fiction, you've got YA, and even science fiction thrown in there. So I think it's a fun mix, and I can't wait to chat about each book with you. So let me go through them one at a time and chat about each one and tell you what I liked. Okay, so first up, we have this book called Remote Control. Now, this is from Nnedi Okorafor, and it's actually a novella, so it's a really short book, but it was so creative. Packed in this thing is so much story. So it is an African futurism book. So think, African folklore mixed with sci-fi, and that's what you get. And it seems like it wouldn't fit, but it completely works. It's the story of this 7-year-old girl who, the day after this meteor shower, she finds this seed in her backyard, and she picks it up, and it starts to create this glow down her arm, and this green power goes inside of her, and it changes her, and she has powers from the rest of the story on, and some are good and some are bad, and she has to learn how to live with that. So it's really interesting because she is really young. She has this little fox companion that follows her around. She's feared in her village because when she gets angry and emotional and lashes out, it sends this green pulse that destroys everything. She ends up accidentally hurting people that she loves, and so she flees her village and goes to other villages. The point of the story is her trying to find this box that the seed came in so that she can rebury it and kind of start over. One of the really interesting parts of these powers that come into being when she touches the seed is that anytime she touches an electronic device, it deactivates it. So essentially, from here on out in this novel, she's off the grid. So because this is this futuristic novel, when she goes into this town, there's these robots, which is hysterical because if any of you like Doctor Who, it kind of reminds me of Daleks from Doctor Who, exterminate, exterminate. But there's these robotic policemen in the center of town, and they read you and they read your devices so that they can identify you right away. So it's really interesting because for such a short novel, it does make you really think how connected we are, what type of information we're putting out into the world, what that information says about us. And she has to learn how to read people without any of that. And she has to learn what to trust because she can't be connected to any kind of electronics. So there's no Googling, there's no looking things up, there's no, GPS for directions. And she goes completely off grid. The other thing that it brings up is corporate greed, because there's these corporations that come into town and buy up the farms and are building things, and are these things good for these people? Yes, they provide jobs, but is it filling their life with positive things and good change? So overall, this book just it captured my imagination. It was really short. I think my only complaint with this would be that I really wanted a whole novel. I wanted to know what happened as she got older. Was she able to connect with any other people? Are there other people like her out there that found these seeds? But sometimes, books that are short like this are great because they open up your mind and help you just think and imagine and create, and don't have all the answers, so it helps you think. I also think this was just really creative and fun. So this was one of the best ones from January. Another book that totally blew me away was Ties That Tether by Jay Nagaro. And this is a rom-com, and I don't ever read rom-coms. Not to knock rom-coms, they're just not a genre that I'm drawn to all the time. Usually I read them in February because you're supposed to, but other than that, I don't really read them. I actually picked this up because I thought it would be totally different. I literally bought the book because of the cover, and this cover is stunning. This book is so deep for a rom-com. So here again, romance books are usually light and fluffy, and this centers around an interracial relationship and what that means and looks like, and the stresses that surround it and the complications that arise because of it. And it's done in such a powerful way. I really loved this book. So this book centers around this woman who is super smart, high-powered, has a fantastic marketing job, always does the right thing. She's Nigerian, and her mom is always setting her up on these dates with other Nigerian men because she wants to keep her culture alive and ensure that she marries a Nigerian man. And she always does what her mom says and doesn't really think about it. Well, one night she has a one-night stand, and it is with a white man, and she kind of feels like, okay, I'm getting it out of my system, that was fun, doesn't really think anything of it. And then lo and behold, like months later, she goes to work and the guy is like working in her office. So you're just like, yeah, like cringeworthy moment. But what I love is this doesn't fall into cheese factor. This book takes that concept and really dives deep. You know, why is she still living for her mom and her mom's dreams and her mom's needs? And what does it look like for her to make decisions on her own? And what does it mean to stay true to your faith, to stay true to your culture? I thought this book was actually really thought-provoking. So yes, it's a rom-com, but it really brings up really interesting points. You know, she promises her father on his deathbed that she will marry a Nigerian man, and so she has that weight of that expectation on her. But she also is an independent woman and wants to begin making her own choices. And so what does that look like to honor your parents and honor your past, but still make decisions that are good for your own future? I also really liked the concept of identity. You know, what is your identity? Where does your identity come from? Is it from your job? Is it your religion? Is it your culture? Is it what you do, who you are, who you're related to? And I think in this book, she has to figure that out, and it raises a lot of really interesting questions. Her mother is really overbearing, and it's really easy to not like her, but yet, you know, you end up learning where that comes from, and it's a very endearing novel. So this one won my heart over. The next book that I read and loved was Saving Ruby King by Catherine Adele West, and actually ended up getting to a book chat with this author. She is fantastic, super funny, and just had gave us a lot of good insights on her decisions in this story and, you know, where it came from. So I love book chats, and I love book groups and book discussions and buddy reads. So part of what made this novel great was being able to chat about it with other people. It just enriches your experience, and I think we all bring, you know, our own insight and backgrounds, and it just enriches it. So I encourage you, if you're not in a buddy read, go seek one out, do a book club, join a book club, because it really enhances your reading experience. This book is a dual timeline, multi-narrative book. So it follows Ruby, but it also follows her mom and her dad. You get scenes from her in present day, but then you get flashbacks to other generations. And it really explores generational trauma and what that does to an individual and to a family. One of the things that I thought made this book extremely unique and just drew me in was that in the interspersing chapters that are different perspectives and narratives, one of the characters and one of the perspectives is the church. So the church, as in the building, gives its perspective of seeing these people come through their doors and seeing their hardships and hearing their prayers, and how the church experiences these losses and these traumas and these joys. Because, you know, weddings happen in churches and funerals happen in churches, and, you know, desperation and prayers happen in churches and confessions happen in churches. And so this church has seen all of this, and it bears witness to the trauma. And it's so creative. I thought it was just brilliant. It really made the book for me, to be honest. This book is the story of Ruby, but really it's also the story of her parents, because Ruby's mother is murdered and her father is most likely, they think, to blame. The police come and they brush it off as no big deal because this is what happens in Southside Chicago, violence, you know, someone probably broke in. So even though he has a history of abuse, they don't really look at him. And neighbors and friends who have witnessed this abuse and turned a blind eye to the abuse, you know, wonder, gosh, is there anything that they could have done? But then they never spoke up. So it looks into, you know, that kind of trauma and domestic violence and what is said and what is not said and how that affects everyone that's involved. The other thing that I really enjoyed about this book was the themes of friendship, female friendship in particular, what that means and looks like. What does it mean to be a good friend? What does it take to be a friend? Does being a friend mean stepping in and interceding? Does being a friend mean looking away? Does it mean all of those things? And when? Obviously, this book has themes of trauma, trigger warnings for trauma, domestic violence, abuse. I read this over on Instagram with the JM Bibliator, the Glutinous Bookshelf, and the latest book crush. So ladies, thank you for hosting this. Thank you for bringing the author on to chat with us. That was fantastic. And thanks to the author for sharing this story. It was her debut novel, which was really hard to believe, and I really look forward to reading more from her. This is 50 Words for Rain by Asha Lemy, and this was in my literati book box for January. And it was my Malala pick. So Malala hosts on her literati app these book chats. So you can chat about the book, and then at the end, the author comes on for an interview. And I will say that after I share about this book, I will go ahead and link that interview because honestly, this book was heartbreaking and it made me slightly angry, disappointed, confused at the end. But then I watched the author interview and I really appreciated her insight into the choices she made for the ending of this book and the why. And then it just made me love this book even more. So what is this book about? This book follows the life of this young girl who is half Japanese and half Black. Her mother abandons her early on to her grandmother. The grandmother is a Japanese aristocrat and ends up locking this little girl in the attic, like locking her in the attic. Has anyone watched Flowers in the Attic? Red Flowers in the Attic? Creepy, like I had creepy grandma vibes in this one. So she's locked in the attic and then made to endure horrible abuse. The grandmother pays all this money to have these acidic baths that try to strip her black skin of color, and they're super painful and horrible and disgusting. Then the grandmother, on top of it, beats her into submission. So she not only is not allowed to leave the attic, she doesn't go outside for like 3 years, but then the grandmother will feel like she has talked back and she will beat her with a wooden spoon. So a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect. The story evolves and eventually she finds out she has a half-brother, and this half-brother who's been educated elsewhere comes back to visit and she finally gets to meet him. Now at this point the story begins to evolve and change because the brother, while he doesn't really necessarily acknowledge her at first, he doesn't shun her away either, and he thinks the grandmother's treatment is horrible. So little bit he begins to allow these freedoms to occur in her life. She's allowed to go outside, she's allowed to, you know, speak to him, she's allowed to come down to the kitchen, and her world starts to open up and she starts to want more. She gains a little independence, and just when you're like, yay, I love where this story is headed, the grandmother sells her. Not kidding, I can't make this up. Grandmother sells her to a brothel where her virginity is auctioned off. Disgusting. But you know what? It happens. Like, it happens. And so sometimes we have to read these things to realize, like, this is something that really does happen. So then she's living in this brothel and she's learning things from the madam there and growing in a whole different way. And again, just when you think all hope is lost, then something new happens. So this is a story, gosh, it has so many themes. It's a story of identity. It's a story of perseverance, of never losing hope, of, you know, staying true to who you are despite your circumstances. But it's also a book about family and what does that mean? What does it mean to be family, and what choices do you make because of being family? I will say, this book broke my heart, you guys. The ending, like, crushed my soul. But don't let that stop you. Like, sometimes, okay, here's the thing. Sometimes I like a good cry. Sometimes I like a sad story. And this was one of those books. It just worked for me. It was sad, but it was beautiful. I thought the writing was beautiful. I cannot believe this gal is 24. I can't believe this is her first book. So I'm really stoked to see what she writes next. So this one definitely made the top of my list. And lastly, but 100% not least, Angel of Greenwood by Randy Pink. This was my #1 favorite book that I read in January of 2021, and here's why. This is a YA historical fiction book that reenacts the actual event that happened in history, in our nation's history, called the Greenwood Massacre of 1921. This is an actual event, Google it, look it up, that a lot of people don't know about. I certainly didn't learn about it in history class. I think some people even in Tulsa, Oklahoma did not even know about this. But this is what happened. In 1921, a group of white men went into this prominent black town that was thriving, that had black businesses. They called it the Black Wall Street. It had, barbershops and grocery stores and tailors and electronic stores, and all run by black owned businesses and thriving black community, and ransacked it, burned the place down. We're talking, by the end of the day, there were like 45 blocks, not houses, 45 blocks completely destroyed, 800 people injured, hundreds dead, over 300 people dead. And essentially they tried to wipe out an entire community. And I've said this before, for some reason YA books really work for me when it comes to difficult subjects, whether it's, identity, rights, racism, equality. YA books have this magical ability to help you really connect and to think and to retell harrowing events in a very simple way. This book is no different. It follows these two teenagers, fictional teenagers that lived during this time, and they are just trying to grow and learn on their own. There's Isaiah, who's a little bit of a troublemaker, but he also is like secretly a little book nerd. He loves to read. He actually really likes school. He keeps a journal where he writes and creates poetry and writings. And he ends up crossing paths with this sweet girl. So Angel is a girl who is really shy and quiet. She kind of stays out of the spotlight. She is actually caring for her father, who is very ill, and she works at a store to try to raise money to help her mom pay for the mortgage. And she's just kind of considered a do-gooder, but she's got a big heart. Well, these two end up coming together because the teacher puts them together on a project. What's fun is watching this relationship of two different people come together. They have completely different backgrounds, completely different political ideals. She, believes in passive resistance, that if you just work hard and put your head down and do the right thing, you'll be rewarded. He believes more in black power, that you are destined to rise up and reclaim what is rightfully yours. And of course, this all comes to a head at the end when this massacre happens. So this was a beautifully done book. It's really short, which was amazing because I felt so fully immersed in the story that her writing just makes this entire community come alive. You could feel the spirit of these people, the heart of these people, and you just break with them when their town breaks, and you want to help them rebuild and rise up at the end. This book was incredibly done, and I loved it. I wish that I'd read it as a book club because I would have loved to talk about it. One of the really interesting things is that in the back of the book, the author lists other places where this happened, and she kind of challenges other authors, write about these places, write about these towns, write about these events, because they're not being told and we need our history told. And so I love that, and I hope she writes more, because I thought this was a fantastic book and I would absolutely read more by her. So those are my favorite books, my friends, from January of 2021. You can head to my blog to read about all the other books that I read and find other reviews. So let me know, have you read any of these? Do any of these strike your fancy? Let me know below what books that you have read from these, or if there's one that sounds interesting to you. Stay tuned for my next video where I highlight what I'm reading in February. It's Black History Month, plus I have 3 books for Mama Leighellen's book club that I'll be reading and highlighting. As always, thanks for stopping by and come back soon.